Hello, fellow writers. I'm Lewis. That over there is Tolkien, and you have found the Scriptureian Society.
Welcome, everybody.
Hello.
I accidentally jumped poor Carissa, aka Lewis, because I usually give her a warning that I'm about to start recording, and I forgot to warn her this time. So we were literally in the middle of conversing too when I clicked it, and I was like, my bad.
I was like in the middle of a question, and I was like, oh, look, she started.
Whoops, that's an accident. Oh well. I am Ash, aka Tolkien. I'm the clumsy one in every friend group. So
all the friend groups you've ever been a part of.
It's true. It's really true. I've been told multiple times, unironically though, that I'm really good at falling.
Nice.
So I'm like, hey, that's not bad. That's a useful skill.
Yeah. I'm always the third friend.
The third friend
groups. Yeah.
That's hilarious.
You and Marianne. Mm-hmm. And before that, it was two of my friends from like college years, but high school. And then two of my friends from high school, and then two of my friends from middle school. And I'm always the third one.
It's so funny. It's because like your social sustenance needs, I feel like, are so much lower than most people's. Like you are the social equivalent of a cactus. Like you just don't need all that much.
I love that. I want that on a t-shirt.
Hang on. Unlock the door, Javi. Oh my God. He's just trying to
waiting
open the door.
You?
He's jiggling the handle.
Okay, pause.
Now you unlock it. It's recording. Okay. He unlocks audience. Hi, audience, he says.
Hi,
he unlocks it. Carissa says hi. He unlocks it and lets himself in right when I've gotten up over there to open the door.
Of course.
Yeah.
Husbands,
man. There's something. What did you eat for dinner today?
Oh my gosh, I had Taco Bell and it was delicious. And Javi's interrupting me again, but I really liked my Taco Bell.
Yes, you know.
It stinks. I'm just kidding. I love you.
Did you hear that?
I heard hello again. Was it for me?
He said, no, he asked me if I was cooking and I said, yeah. And he said, because it stinks in here.
And wow, I was way off.
And then he said, just kidding. He's such a punk. I'm going to smack him after this. He knows he's protected because we're recording, so I can't just keep getting up to go after him.
But see, now it's going to build over time.
It is. It's just going to build. It's just going to get worse. Nothing that time. Before when you said that, he was like, see. That's true. So you're saying you had Taco Bell.
I did have Taco Bell, but I had Taco Bell. You know what I was saying? Okay, so Ash and Marianne and I had this
weird emphasis
discussion.
In the wrong syllable.
It is not a weird emphasis. It is an emphasis. Anyway,
it is the wrong emphasis.
We had this whole debate. What do you guys think? Is it Taco Bell, where the emphasis is on the ta in taco, or is it Taco Bell? So I was actually thinking about this earlier today. It's Taco Bell because in the old timey commercials, do you remember the little Chihuahua? He would be like Taco Bell. And I think that's why I say it like that.
That's hilarious.
I mean, I'm also right, but I think that's why. I think that's why it's so firmly in my brain.
The thing is, Taco Bell puts the emphasis on taco. You're like, I'm going to go get tacos. Now I'm going to go get some bells. Like if it was Taco Bell, you're like,
but they say Taco Bell on the commercials.
So it's
disagree.
Taco Bell. Listen, it's Taco Bell.
It's Taco Bell.
We'll never agree on this.
No.
This has been a point of contention forever.
Yes.
That is so
But
funny.
Anyway, I had Taco Bell and it was good.
Nice. That sounds yummy. I made pad thai with this like at home pad thai kit that I got off Imperfect Foods, and it was super good actually.
And what is pad thai?
Pad thai?
Is that Indian?
I think I'm going to sound real dumb. I think it's Thai food, but I don't know for sure because it just says pad thai. So that's why I'm making that assumption. I feel like surely you've had it at some point before. It's rice noodles with this it's got this like savory sauce on it, and it usually has peanuts crumbled up on top. And it's like chicken or shrimp in it often, and like bean sprouts and stuff.
Okay.
It's so good. It is so good.
I am not like a huge Asian cuisine lover. And I think that might just be because I grew up where Mexican food was so popular.
Oh yeah.
But I don't know.
Yeah, it's very possible. Although I don't know a single person who doesn't like pad thai. Like even picky eaters like pad thai. So there's a good chance you'd like it. Everybody likes it. Javi didn't know I was making it. And so he got dinner out with friends. And so I was already like halfway through, like, cause I put shrimp in it today. So I was like almost done deveining a pound of shrimp. And then I was like, you're kidding me.
It's just for you now.
Yeah, it was just for me. So I had half of it. I literally shoveled it down, all that work too. And I shoveled it down the last 5 minutes before we started recording because I was behind schedule. And I was like, dang it.
Aw.
Yeah.
Nice.
How was your week though? How were all the other dinners you had this week?
All the other dinners were good. I can't remember anything off the top of my head. Nope. I ate a cupcake over the sink.
Sink?
Yeah. My dad tells me that is a boy thing to do. I'm not convinced.
No, but I've definitely done that with sweets. Typically, it's either when I don't want a plate or I don't want to be judged. Either one of those things, I'll just stand and eat over the sink because
I'm like, I don't want to clean a plate.
Yeah, I get that. Yeah. I'm just like, or if I don't want anyone else to see what I'm eating and be like, I want some of that because I'm like, this is mine and I don't want to share it.
I'm not sharing it with you.
So it's just so fast when you're eating over the sink.
True. It's true. But anyway, yeah. Let's see. What did I do this week? So obviously it is a new year. And so Goodreads challenge is a thing that I'm doing. And I'm sure many of you are too.
The thing that I'm doing.
I have a very high goal this year, even compared to my other years. Usually my goal is to read 100 books, but I usually tag on the added goal of 400 page average for those 100 books. But because my book count is going to be so high, I have decided to allow myself to read some shorter books and have a lower page average count. And so I was going through some of the books I had on my shelf. And I have this series of books that I inherited from my aunt and mom, because they're sisters, right? And I am the only, I don't know if there's a name for this. Like from my grandmother, I am the only one left in the matrilineal line. So like my mom's sister had a boy, and then the only other girls in the family are from their brothers. So I'm like the only one left in the line. So
there's gotta be a name for that.
There's gotta be, right?
Yeah.
But I inherently got this like series of books that they read and like collected when they were younger, and it was like this thing that they did together.
Aww.
They are called the Felicia Cartwright books.
Oh my god.
And they are essentially Christian Nancy Drew.
I love that.
And they're so fun. They are very 60s and 70s.
That's hilarious.
So reading them is a trip, but they're very fun and they're very cool, and they're like strictly 128 pages each.
So somehow, specific.
Yeah. So I read 4 of them yesterday because they're so short. And I was like, sweet, halfway through my monthly goal. So anyway.
Your monthly goals are crazy.
I know. I'm reading 12 books a month this year. That's my goal. So I'm hoping there are 19 Felicia Cartwright books, but we only have 16 because the other 3 are very rare. And I've tried to hunt them down and I can't find them anywhere.
That is so funny.
I know, but then I have 16. So I figure if I disperse them through the first few months, it'll help me kind of get ahead on my goal. So
yeah,
that's what I've been doing.
Nice. I have been listening to The Hunchback of Notre Dame.
Ah, yes.
Yep. Because that is what we're doing over on That Pretentious Book Club. That's this week's coming episode. And Carissa is going to be joining us because she loves it. And boy, is this book long.
Oh, yes.
He spent so much time describing like the different periods of Paris. I was like,
it's like a whole chapter.
It is. I was like, this is not relevant to the plot.
I know.
Like we are just now getting to Quasimodo and I'm like 5 hours into the audiobook and I'm like,
it's so long.
Why did you recommend this to me?
It's so good though, like as a whole. And I think what I really liked about it, we can talk about this more on the other podcast, but it's so different from the Disney movie. That like in every possible way.
Every way different. It made me think. I'm not actually really a huge proponent of you have to read the book before you see the movie. I actually think for live action movies, it's better to see the movie first, because then you can enjoy it for what it is. And then you can also enjoy the book for what it is. But if you've already read the book, the movie will most likely be ruined in one way, unless it's like a magical, like Harry Potter or the Hunger Games, like something that was done really well. But there's, you know, a tiny little handful of book to movie adaptations that are truly done right. But I think my huge exception to this rule is animated movies, because they do tend to be so very different that like I only saw the Hunchback of Notre Dame cartoon once, but I still like, that's all the imagery I have from it. So I'm having such a hard time reconciling that storyline with this book, which is, as you said, completely dissimilar.
I just want to know who sat down, read Hunchback of Notre Dame and thought, kids will like this.
Yeah, seriously. No, it's because like their friend like drunkenly dared them. They were like, you should do like a kid story. Yeah, it turns into a kid's story, dude. I bet you can't. And he was like, I'm gonna do it. And then he did it.
Are you daring me?
Are you
daring you?
and then he did. For some reason. And I remember enjoying the movie. I think it's a really pretty movie, but it is not the book.
Yep, it's very different. Yeah. And very long.
Yeah.
So how far are you? Like only 5 hours?
Only about 5 or 6 hours in now. And
Do you know
I
what
feel
the
like
page equivalent is?
I don't. I would know the chapter equivalent, but I don't remember what they said the last time. It was like chapter something. And it was book first or something. And I'm like,
it's divided into sections. Yep.
And they call it book first because they're French.
Yep. Those Frenchmen.
Yep. I'm finally fully recovered, so that's good. If you listen to the Scriptureian Society last week or TPBC last week, even, I'm sorry. My voice was so gross. I was sick. I got the Rona again. Somehow magically, even though I work from home and I literally have 2 friends and I don't even see them. And by 2 friends, I mean 2 friends in the city, and I literally don't even see them. Right. So I was like, who the hell knows how I got this? But I'm finally
through the walls.
It totally must have. But yeah, so I'm grateful I wasn't that bad. I felt like I had strep, which I think I said before, but it's so nice to be able to speak and not be like in active pain speaking.
You sound very musical now.
Thank you. Very, very it's in comparison. I'm not actually musical. It's just in comparison to the like ogreish voice of last week.
Yeah.
Now it's like she has a voice like a flute. I've never really understood that metaphor.
Is that, I guess, high and
yeah,
squeaky?
It's like high.
Are flutes squeaky?
They're not supposed to be.
That's maybe I've only ever heard bad flute playing.
Yeah, it depends on the talent of the musician.
Yeah,
that's funny. Yeah.
Okay, so speaking of squeaky, last night it was very, very windy here, and I went down at like 11:30 to the fridge to cut myself some slices of cheese as a midnight snack. And as I'm cutting this cheese, the wind makes something squeak outside, and I freeze, and I'm like, I don't think there's anything out there that would squeak. So my mind is immediately that someone is like, screw driving the windows open. So
oh my God.
But I have my cheese knife. So I crept over to the door and like with the knife up to my face, I'm like looking out because our light doesn't work to like look outside in the dark.
No.
So I'm looking out and I'm like, okay, I don't see anything. And it was like a squeak, but also a whistle. Like if you had an old swing that was swinging in the wind, that's what it sounded like. There's nothing out there that should be able to cause that noise. So I'm like, okay, someone's just like opening the window while whistling a tune or something. I don't know. It was very scary.
Oh my God.
And then I put the knife in the sink and, it's soaking there overnight. And then I hear it again. So then I get out a new knife.
Oh my
I go
God.
back to the window and I'm looking, I'm like, it's probably just the wind. And then I just had my cheese and went back to my room.
This is the whole story. You never figured out what it was?
Nope. I think it might be this little owl. It's supposed to glow. It's supposed to like take in sunlight and then glow at night, but it doesn't really work anymore. So now it's just decorative and it's head bobs. So I'm wondering if that's what it was, but I don't know. Still unclear.
Oh my God. That is so weird.
Yep.
I really thought there was going to be a resolution to that. No. I really thought you were going to be like, and I figured out what it was.
I mean, like if I end up dead tomorrow, that could be the resolution. As a story, upsetting. I would be satisfied with that. As a life thing, that would suck.
You crack me up. For you, like stories in life are so like there's almost no difference for you.
Nope.
That is so funny. Oh my goodness.
Yep.
Well, do you have any book recs this week?
I do. I have one. I have over the past year or so gotten really into, is it 2 years? It must be 2 years. It was 2020. I got really into Agatha Christie. So I've read a bunch of those now. I'm not really a murder mystery person, but I really like hers.
I've become weirdly into mysteries, especially murder mysteries. I don't know if that's just like when you're a growing up thing. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's like the only adult fiction I like.
Yeah. Because it's still exciting, even though it takes place in the real world. Anyway, so I read the ABC Murders.
Ooh.
It's about a serial killer that kills according to the alphabet. So they kill like someone with an A name in an A city and so on. Yep. And it was very fun. I liked it a lot. They
made there's a film not a film, but like a TV show adaptation of it. Which I watched like last year or the year before. It's so good. If you see like the ABC Murders, it's, oh my God, it was really good.
Yay. I'll have to see if I can find it. I think I'm going to do a Catherine's Corner episode on it because I have a lot to say. I mean, I'm not like a connoisseur of mystery, but I think there are some good things to learn from it. So I enjoyed it a lot.
You have an outsider's perspective, which is oftentimes more objective about the genre. So
true.
I don't have any book recs because I'm currently reading The Hunchback of Notre Dame, and frankly, I wouldn't wish it on anyone. So long. I
think there are two reasons to enjoy this. One, once you get to the end and you see the story as a whole, I think it's possible to have enjoyed it. And two, I do think if you're reading it just for the writing, it is also very good. Yeah, but there's moments it jumps around. It's very weird.
Moments I really like, and there's like descriptions I really like, and there's sentences I think are really artful. So there's tiny little pieces I think are gorgeous. But then overall, I'm like 5 hours in, and I just met Quasimodo, and I'm like, somebody needed to learn to cut.
Like, I know, it's like he could have used a strong editor, but
he really could have. Well, this is my everlasting tirade against classics is, and it's because also what people expected from fiction was so different before,
and they got paid by the word.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm just like, cut. I like conciseness. I don't like anything extra. You don't have to have. Ernest Hemingway all the way. So classics are just usually hard for me, and I've really been flashing back to college lately, where like I was definitely on the outside of most of our English lit, people, because, they're there because they like literature. And I'm like, I'm here because I like books and writing, not specifically because I like classic literature. So people be like, what's your favorite classic? And I'm like, nothing.
Pride and Prejudice, probably.
Pride and Prejudice. Yeah, it is. And then, I mean, Mark Twain is great. So probably anything by Mark Twain, because he's funny as hell. But yeah, classics are hard, especially this one. So thanks so much, Carissa.
There are things in the book as a whole that I just really want to talk about. So
you'll
see when you get there. It does get exciting. It's just the opening is like, why are you telling us all of this?
Yeah, there was like 2 really exciting parts so far, and then the whole meeting. Since I've met Quasimodo, it's been really interesting. So I'm hoping that we'll continue in that vein of excitement for at least a little while longer.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, what's our word of the week?
Oh, okay. Verisimilitude.
Verisimilitude. I think I know this one.
I know, it sounds very familiar, probably. The appearance of being true or real, the quality of being real or true. So like if you had a fake flower, but it looks really close to the real thing, it's a verisimilitude of a flower.
Ooh, a verisimilitude of flower. I wouldn't have known how to use it in that way. Verisimilitude. Oh, I'm going to totally use that.
It's super
fun. Good one. You can definitely use that word. Oh, antediluvian, a word from one of our other episodes, is in The Hunchback of Notre Dame.
Yeah. I don't remember that specifically.
It is. Yeah. And then, what was it? Dang it. There's a character, Harry Potter, Nicholas Flamel, the Philosopher's Stone. Nicholas Flamel and the Philosopher's Stone is talked about in The Hunchback of Notre Dame.
Yeah, that's right. I do vaguely remember that too.
Yeah. I was like, does Carissa remember this? And she's just keeping it from me.
There's so much about that book that I was like overwhelmed by. So
trying to remember everything in that book is crazy because it's a really, really, really long book.
True. And it doesn't really focus on the details you would think it would.
No, that's the thing too, is the details it's given me. I'm like, I didn't want to know about these details. These are not the details I would have asked for detail on.
Are these going to be important later? Not really.
No, but I do like most books that are set in Paris, especially like historical books. Just something about historical Paris is such like a there's so much upheaval that it's like just a really interesting backdrop. So I am enjoying that. Yeah. Well, our theme this week is really special for multiple reasons, because this was a request from a listener, right?
Yes. Someone on TikTok requested that we talk about this
topic. You should, yes.
About magic systems and how to create magic systems in your book. Specifically, I mean, I'm going to talk about a lot of things, but specifically like how to attach it to your theme and morality and like things like that. So
that's great. And what's like funny is when she said we got a listener request for an episode, I was like, and it was for magic systems, I was like, hang on, is she like referring to me as a listener? Because I don't remember if I actually asked or I just wanted to ask. But Carissa is very good at creating magic systems and also like analyzing and understanding magic systems. I like just don't put that much thought into it. I just kind of like full force go ahead. And then I'm like, why does it feel like my magic system's not as, it's not as deep as it should be. So this is something that I've been wanting to ask Carissa about forever too. So whoever requested this, thank you.
Yes.
And I am with you.
It's like when people talk about like, I know you didn't ask, but I've been waiting for people to ask me about this. I'm like, you asked, so let me go off.
I know. And I've definitely heard you talk about magic systems like a lot before. So like, this is definitely one of your things. So this is like the second episode in a row where I kind of like, take the lead, Carissa, teach me, give me all your knowledge.
Yeah. We'll do something where you're an expert next week.
Sarcasm. I'm just kidding. Dialogue, maybe. Have we done one on dialogue? We already did. Part two, dialogue. I have just a few strengths.
Right. I know. This is really, when it comes to world building and specifically magical world building, I do think that's really my strong suit. So it sounds kind of arrogant that I'm like, I love this, I'm so good at this, but like it really is the thing I'm the best at.
You're like, well, see, that's me with dialogue. I'm like, I know I'm good at dialogue.
Yeah.
I know it's one of the only things that I'm like just naturally good at.
Right. Everything else I had to work at, but this I'm like, I got this.
Yes, exactly. Yep.
All right. So gosh, I have like these sloppy notes that I'm going to try to follow to the best of my ability to kind of order it in as structured a way as possible. So just up front, because you kind of said how you kind of jump in and then like later on find potential problems. So I do think you can go one of two ways. You can either try to plan your world out really detailed ahead of time, or you can make it up as you go. If we've said this like a million times before, if you do it as you go, you are going to have more editing in your later drafts, but you can do that, because I would say that's actually what I did. I didn't think about a lot of this stuff up front. It just revealed itself over time. And I do think that's why, especially if you're a new writer, you should really give your book, I would say, at least a good year before you start to query it or do anything really professional with it, because you want to give yourself time to really like marinate in the world and like really get familiar with it. So that's my recommendation, particularly in a fantasy, because you want to get to know the world really well. And I do think that a lot of this, if you know the world up front, some of the details aren't necessarily going to make it into that final draft, but it will still make it feel more real because you know what you're talking about. So all right. As I pause.
No, you're good. I'm just making a note of it. Pause whenever you want to.
I know. I'm like, I want this to sound good and make sense. So I'm like, all right, how do I organize it? So I am going to talk about my own magic system because it's easiest for me to talk about that because I know it so well. So my first point is, basically the backbone of this magic system is that there are these people and people with magic, and they're called Mauritians. Okay, that's what I named them and stuff.
I love that.
This is my first point. I think it's really beneficial for many reasons to come up with your own sort of species or term or word for whatever your main thing is going to be. So like if you're doing witches, that's fine, but maybe come up with a different term. Maybe call them something different. I've been seeing witches around a lot lately. I've been seeing mages come up a lot. You have like warlocks and kind of the typical magic terminology.
Yeah.
And that's all fine and good. That can totally work. But if you come up with your own name, it's going to do two things. One, it's going to make that your book or series stand out really well in the minds of readers. So they're not going to easily forget it. It's going to be very memorable because they have this special term for the people in your book. And two, when you have to sit down and name something, it almost helps you pin down better what the essence of that thing is. It's kind of like when you're naming a baby, you're kind of thinking about like, what do I want for this baby? What do I think of this baby? It kind of whittles down to like the core of that baby. So when you name something, so like Mauritian, where does that come from? Well, Mirus in Latin means special or unique. So Mauritian means, if you like, you know, dissect it, one who specializes in something special or unique, essentially. Yeah. And the basis of my magic system is that everyone has their own individual power. Yeah. So when you have to kind of sit down and name it that way, and you don't use something that already exists, you can, you know, give it, it forces you to think through it a little bit. It gives you more character. And then it also allows you as the writer to really think about what you're trying to do with the magic system.
Yeah. I think also if you use like a word like witch or mage even or sorcerer that like is a really well-known word, you also risk you don't risk it. This is just true. Your readers are going to come to your story with a preconceived notion of what those characters are, what they're like. So like it's probably just easier to build your own image of those things with a different word, because it's always, no matter how you try to define them, if you use words like that, witch, mage, whatever it is, it's already really well established in culture and in fiction, then your readers are going to have their own idea going into it. So it's going to be harder to shape their view of what you're trying to create.
Yeah. And like with me, I've said this before, I'm not a huge fan of most witch books. So it might even turn people off if they've seen that particular type done badly before. Even if yours is good, they might just already be like, nope, I'm out. Yeah. So giving it your own special name.
It's me with the vampires. If somebody wants to rename something that's not a vampire, but it is a vampire, and they trick me into it, and then it's like really good, I'm totally okay with that happening. But I am just saying, if you put that it's about vampires, I'm not reading it.
Right. You're like, I'm over that. I'm done.
not doing it. Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's a cool trick. And so, yeah, it's a good like marketing thing, and it stands out in the reader's mind, but then it is also a way to help you as the writer pin down what you're really trying to do with your magic system. Yeah. So then in that vein, so in my story, so I have these Mauritians, and they're basically people with magic. There are 7 species total that have magic. So there are other species in this book, and you don't have to have multiple magical species in a magical world, but I do think you need to think about it in advance, and you need to know, are these people with magic the only ones, or are they part of a bigger world? Because that is going to change how you write it. And I also think you need to consider why. Let's take witches, for example, because they're just easy. Are witches, why don't cats have magical powers? Why don't other creatures in the world have magical powers? Or do they? And how do they interact with each other? You can make up your own magical creatures. I did that. I have this thing called Amara, which is essentially a thing that eats dreams, because it's like a nightmare.
Ooh, that's cool.
I like that. But then I also have like phoenixes, which are very, not typical, but everyone kind of knows what those are. Yeah. And you can do a different take on them, or you can do them very, traditional mythologically. But you do need to know not how many, but is there one species? Are there a couple, or are there a ton? Because that's going to add to your background details, essentially. So like in Harry Potter, maybe people didn't catch this, but vampires do exist in Harry Potter, in the world of Harry Potter. Yeah, they do. They are briefly mentioned like once or twice, just in passing, very casually. You never see a real vampire, I don't think. If it is, it's very brief. Yeah. You see werewolves, you see giants, you see obviously wizards and witches and all that kind of stuff. What? What? But you don't see the vampires. But because they're mentioned in passing, it gives you this glance into the bigger world, and the fact that what we as readers are seeing is not the whole story. Yeah. And I would argue that little details like that are what make a world feel bigger. If you get too specific and everything becomes super relevant only to the story, it can feel small. And you don't want to add details that are too unnecessary. Like you don't want to get into this info world dump kind of a situation where you're giving people like Hunchback of Notre Dame details that don't matter.
It's so true.
Yeah, but little details in passing that you as the writer know exist. Mm-hmm. It's just beneficial to have those in there. It makes it kind of feel this. This is my metaphor. Okay. If you're like a parent and you're on the playground and you're filming your kid because you want to just like have a record of what they were like as a kid, other kids are going to be passing by in the background. You're going to see that the wind is blowing. You're going to see like the setting and all of that kind of stuff, even though the focus is the kid. And when you're writing, you want to make sure that it doesn't look like the kid exists in the vacuum.
Yeah.
You want to make sure that there's background detail going on, that there are people passing in and out. Maybe some of them come to the foreground. Maybe they befriend your kid or something, and then they're a character in the video. But maybe they don't. And you don't want to, zoom in on them like weirdly if they're not your own kid, if they're not the point. But you do need to realize that they're there and that they exist. And so like having other species or other mentions of different types of skill sets magically that your main character and your main cast doesn't have can really add that depth without taking up a lot of time. It can just be a brief mention. So that's another thing. And in that vein, it's going to depend on if it's like an urban fantasy versus a high fantasy, but you should know the history of magic in your worlds and how it has played into the formation of any kind of government or system, right? So like in an urban fantasy, it's not going to be like a government of a country, probably. It's going to be like a secret society type of deal. But if you have a major nation, trying to think of something like Mistborn by Brandon Sanderson does this. Shadow and Bone does this, where
Shadow and Bone.
The people in charge are at least aware of, if not have themselves some kind of magic, and that has contributed to the system that exists. I
think Leigh Bardugo did really great in her Shadow and Bone, and even in Six of Crows, because it's all in the Grishaverse. Like every book, they even reference like other like leaders of other kingdoms that come up in other books. Like it's the world is so comprehensive, and they all know magic, and every country has a different perception of magic.
Exactly.
So even if that is never directly like, even if they never go to that country, even like it's just so thorough, the whole world building, and you can definitely see how each society in each country has gotten to where it is now because of magic.
Right.
It's just interesting, even though some of those countries the characters never even go visit. Like it's not even that big a deal, but like this is why people are into the Grishaverse, is because it is all encompassing. You can just step into it, and it is so authentic.
Yeah. And she lays those little details into even the first book in Shadow and Bone. And she does expand on it later in Six of Crows and in some of the other sequels, but she doesn't actually have to, because if it had just been that original trilogy, it still just would have added depth to that world. I think that's really cool. And so that's something to think about. You want to make sure that if you have, particularly if it's a system where there are a lot of different nations, they should have different perspectives on magic. If they all have the same perspective, that's going to be a little unrealistic.
It's unrealistic. It's hard to swallow. It just makes it feel 2D instead of 3D. That's having like like Carissa said, like really going into the history of magic in the kingdom that the book is set in or whatever. And but then also like in anything else that touches that kingdom. Like, does your kingdom trade with other kingdoms? Okay, well then they're touched by other kingdoms. So then we can get a glimpse of what does that kingdom think? How has magic formed that kingdom? But taking every opportunity to just drop in little details, not to info dump, just to drop in little details.
Right. So from my own personal example from my book, right? So you have this country where all of the Mauritians live, and then the other magical species as well. And there are four major governments that exist. Now, in the first book, really 3 of them matter, and one only because it's like distantly going to be related down the line. It's only kind of briefly mentioned, but you have like the quote unquote good guys, right? That are like, magic is a right and everyone has the right to use it however they want. And then you have the quote unquote bad guys that are like, no, you bear some responsibility. And if you use it badly, we're going to take it away from you, essentially. And that's like what makes them the bad guys. But you see where they're coming from with that perspective.
Yeah.
Then you have there's like these 13 cities, and they're all kind of sovereign, but they all kind of band together because otherwise there aren't enough of them to do anything. And they don't really have any stance at all. They kind of side with whoever is in power at the time. And so they're kind of fluctuating. And then way far away on the other end of this country, you have the South, right, with a capital S, and they're kind of like the Americans.
I feel that. That's
in
so
the sense
funny.
that they're very materialistic and very like I guess flamboyant is the word or whatever. And the thing that I gave to them that is very unusual in the northern part of the country is that even though they have people with magic, it really comes out more in the things that they have. So their buildings have magic in them.
Right.
Their food is magical. Their, any kind of defense system gate is magical. So while individuals can use it, they don't use it so much. Whereas in the North, it's really individuals using things. They don't really put magic into their things. And so this creates a divide between the two, and also represents how magic can be used in many different ways, which I just think is fun. So you have to think about the different ways that magic can be used. Can your people put magic into objects? Are they supposed to? Is that frowned upon? Is it even possible? And then how one country or region or whatever utilizes magic, what does that say about them as a people? If you're materialistic in your commerce or your general attitude, that's going to show through in the way that you use magic. And if you're not, if it's more about individuality and about people like it is in the North, it's going to come through in that your objects aren't just, it's not going to occur to you to do that as much because that's not the direction your general culture takes.
That makes a lot of sense. That's really easy to forget to do, but like every culture like could approach the same topic so differently. Like there's some things that they eat in other countries that we are like, oh, we would never eat that,
right?
Or vice versa. And like even something as simple as food is like so drastically different. It's shocking in different cultures in the real world. So like in your magical world, you can do that, and like with everything from like food and culture and speech and words to magic, and like you're saying, how magic is used, maybe to how magical creatures are treated. Which is obviously something that Grishaverse gets into a lot, is like how magical people are perceived and treated very differently, which is probably another thing that you would see vary across. So you just need to think about what varies in real world from culture to culture and see how that applies to your magic system, because
for sure,
realistically, the same kind of stuff would apply.
Yeah. And so like something that I do, and I think it's a really great world building tip just in general when you're coming up with slang, is come up with slang if it's a magical world that is directly related to the important things or the insulting things about magic. So like if you look at what words in different cultures are considered curse words versus slang words, you're going to notice a general attitude toward what they're offended by. So like I'm not going to say any of them because I don't like the words, but you'll notice that a lot of American curse words are bodily functions because we are very offended by the concept of bodily functions. In Britain, for instance, where the big words like, they've always said the F word of Britain is bloody, right? It's because of a very violent past. And so they're very offended by violence. So even speaking the same technical language, we have different versions of what a curse word would be versus something that doesn't even register as a big deal. Like when I first read Harry Potter, I did not read bloody as the equivalent of an F word.
Hell no, we don't do that.
No. And I don't think they see the F word as serious there as we do
I don't
here.
think so either.
And I'm sure Australia has its own thing. And then you get into other languages where that's totally, French is big in Africa, I think. I'm sure they have completely different perceptions of what's insulting there versus in original France, right?
Also, what is holy? I've noticed like across languages, people will usually like, that's not a curse. It's usually just an exclamation like, oh my God, oh Dios mío. Like it's lots of, or holy this, holy that. Like it's a weird, you're right. It's either what a culture is offended by or something that they hold very reverence, which is so strange that we do that.
It's a weird combination, right?
But it's so weird.
And then when you talk about slang, I don't really know if there's a hard and fast rule for slang in the same way, but think about the things in your magical society that would just kind of crop up and make those your slang words, and give different regions different slang words and different curse words. As much as you can. I mean, you don't want to convolute it, especially too much at the beginning when readers are trying to learn a new world, because it's just going to be really, really hard for them to follow. But especially if you're starting in one area and then moving out, language can be, even just in small differences, can be a great way to indicate that they're moving into a new region, or that someone is a stranger or like a foreigner in that land and whatever. So like with my main characters, they are foreigners in this country. They did not grow up there. They end up there, and people can sort of tell that they're foreign because they talk with a slightly different accent and they use different slang words. And so it doesn't have to be connected to the magic system, but you do want to think about how can I take little details of the magic system. If you do have other creatures in your world, does the phoenix or the idea of fire play into their slang more than it might otherwise?
Or does one country call it a phoenix and someone else calls it a firebird or something?
Exactly.
Like as simple as that.
Does that confuse the interpretations? That is something I also do. There's a fairy tale, and the name for phoenix, I don't even remember. Gosh, what do they call it? I think they call it, because I have a thing where phoenixes are shapeshifters too. So I think they call them shapeshifters in the fairy tales, which is confusing to foreigners that are not going to make that connection.
That's smart.
So language can be a good way to play around with just making your magic system feel more real. And like it really did evolve from an original place as opposed to just popping into existence for the purpose of the story. So details.
I'm like taking all of my own notes on what you're saying because I don't always have like a built out magic system because I am not good at it. But I'm trying to do, like I said, this book I'm writing now is in third person. And so I need to do a much broader worldview than I usually do. And so I need to like really, like I've been able to skate by, like not really fully forming my magic system because it's been like one person's journey or whatever, because it's been in first person. I can't get away with that this time. So I'm like, I've never had to do this on this scale. So this is exactly the kind of stuff that I'm looking for.
I do I want to touch on info dumps because I have a really controversial opinion about info dumps.
You're going to say you like them.
I sometimes think they're necessary. And I think this is particularly true in fantasy. I know when people say don't do the info dump, what I think they really mean is
don't do it badly.
Don't take a situation where the action is going to completely stop and then just give a bunch of random information. I think either action or character development still needs to be happening when you're doing the info dump. So like I think a bad example of info dump is in ACOTAR, the first book, when Alice just like pulls Feyre aside and is like, here's everything you need to know. We told you none of this earlier. But here it all is.
And also that info dump came way too late in the book. That should have happened like first third minimum.
For sure. So I do think it's timing, and I do think it's the way that you do it, because reasonably, let's say like if you're Clary from the Mortal Instruments, or if you're Harry Potter from Harry Potter, and someone comes and tells you, hey, you have these magical powers, you're going to have some serious questions. And it would not be unreasonable for you to ask them. You would want to sit down with someone face to face and be like, okay, here's my list. Can we go through everything and answer it? So one of the things that I do that I think makes it work, and this is mostly in book 2, I have these 2 characters that I really love. Are they my favorite? I don't know. They're twins. And while the info dump is happening, they are making like weird, like interjecting their own snide comments and having their own banter on the side about the topics they're discussing.
That's good.
This adds to their character development, as well as giving us the information we need to move on to the next part of the story. Also with info dumps, you do want to make sure that you have breaks between them. So don't give us all the information we need for the whole story at the beginning of the story. Just give us what we need as we go on.
I would say Rowling did that really well in Harry Potter, now that I'm thinking about it. And because we just recently read that one, because like first the whole thing, like Harry meets Hagrid. Okay. We do get a pretty good info dump, but it's like like it arises out of Harry's totally natural curiosity, and they're doing stuff at the same time. Like when they go to Diagon Alley, like they're going from shop to shop and you're seeing things. So it's answering questions with the imagery as well as answering questions verbally from Hagrid, and they're doing stuff the whole time.
Exactly.
And so that's kind of a little info dump. And then I feel like we get a couple other little info dumps, like with Harry and Ron, because, you know, Ron is from the magic world.
Right. Exactly. So he's like Harry's age, and he's giving him more of a, this is what it's like on the inside situation.
But it's always like about them like bonding and growing closer, about like showing off the differences between their backgrounds. So there's always something else going on. It's never just the info dump. There's other stuff happening at the same time, which I think is really necessary. And like you said, she only info dumps the info that you have to have at that point in the book, and then like a chapter later. And
so as much as you can, you should sprinkle in the details. So in like ACOTAR, for instance, because Feyre is like kind of supposed to be looking around for clues, some of those should pay off over time, right? It shouldn't just be someone telling her all. Can you tell that we're not big fans of ACOTAR? I don't love
ACOTAR. I just made a really funny video on That Pretentious Book Club's TikTok. Thank you. Nobody's liked it.
Except for me.
Except for Carissa. It's funny.
But so I think that info dump, if it had been more over a span of time, over the 100 pages or so, we wouldn't feel so overwhelmed, and more like it's a plot device at that point in the story. So as much as you can, give us information as various moments, I guess, as many various moments as you can. But if you do come to a point where reasonably something just needs to be explained to your main character or whatever, I don't think this is a problem, as long as it's not long-winded and boring.
It needs to not be long-winded. It needs to arise naturally out of either a need or pressing curiosity that both your readers and the character has, and other stuff's got to be going on. And I think if you do all those things, then it's fine. But
and I think this is why it's a good strategy, like in Mortal Instruments or Harry Potter, where you have an outsider that doesn't know about magic and then they're brought in. You almost have an excuse for info dumps, because they know nothing, just like the reader knows nothing. And so this is a good strategy to give some information to your readers in an organic way, because it's very reasonable that these characters would have questions. You can have books that open where everyone is aware of the magical situation. Mirror Visitor comes to mind, or Mistborn, which I think are done really well too, but they're not going to be able to explain as much up front and have it still feeling natural, because when we're just operating in the world, I don't just explain to people how physics works as I'm walking around, right? If I were to walk down the street, I'm not thinking about, this is how I walk, it's really weird. So it would have to be that you come upon a natural reason to have to explain how the physics of walking works before that would make any sense. And the same is going to be true with magic. So it has to be, even if it's in first person, people aren't just going to be thinking constantly about the history of their own country that they know really well, or how they do this thing every day.
So there has to be a need for the information.
And the outsider could even be a secondary character. I don't see that done very often, but it could work, because then it gives the main character an excuse to talk about it, but you do need to give them a reason to talk about things that are very everyday to them. So a good strategy is to have an outsider main character, or secondary character, I guess. So another thing that I think works really well with magic systems is when you categorize them. I think I talked about this in my Catherine's Corner episode. If you come up with a system like Mistborn, where people have very individualized gifts. All the Stars and Teeth does this. Percy Jackson does this. A bunch of them do this, where you categorize people by their magical abilities. Even Harry Potter, which doesn't categorize people by ability, but by personality within the magic system. I think people really like this, because I know I like this, because it gives the readers a way to put themselves in the story. They can kind of pick the thing that they like and feel more invested, even if they don't share that particular proclivity with the main character.
Absolutely.
So I think categorizing magic, come up with some kind of a categorization for it. Are people divided into certain classes? Are people divided by ability? Are they, can they only go into certain professions, or have certain family structures based on their magic? just things like that. I think categorizing is a good way. You don't have to do that. You can have more ambiguous systems if you want, but the clearer you can make it, the easier it's going to be for readers to latch on, and then to, of course, invest themselves personally in it.
Yeah. And we know that readers like that. And we know that readers like feeling like they belong to like a special group within the larger group. Like that's just, I mean, look at all of the most popular books over time. Like they're all, almost all of them are like that, especially when it comes to middle grade and YA, probably because also you're trying to kind of like define who you are at that point. So anything that helps,
you want to be in a category.
Yeah. You want a label, but you want a label that you like, or that it gives you something, and you do want to be part of the larger whole, but you still want to be unique.
This is what I was going to say. So I like the chosen one trope. I like with and without it. I think it can be done well and done without. It depends on the story. But even if you're going to go chosen one, you need to give a reason why that person fits the chosen one trope.
Yep.
And B, they can't be so unique that it's unrealistic.
Yep.
So if you take Harry Potter, I'm going to talk about that a lot because I think it's done really well.
Yep.
Harry Potter is not unique in the fact that he's a wizard, right? Everyone's a wizard. He has certain strengths and certain weaknesses, but everyone is, kind of in the same boat as he is.
Yeah.
His chosen one status also isn't random. It's, you can't just make someone a chosen one because of a prophecy, and I know Harry Potter's prophecy, but
that's not really
there's a reason why he fits the prophecy.
Yep.
Right. Is it that he's born on a certain day? Well, in this sort of is it because they're descended from a particular person? Is it because they're in the right or wrong place at the right or wrong time? There's got to be a reason. You can't just make someone special for the sake of making them special.
It's very frustrating.
You have to give a reason behind it. So for my series, for instance, my quote unquote chosen one people are because of a descended bloodline, right? Yeah. So they're part of a bloodline that makes sense that they would be a little more special, but they still function within the rules of the rest of society. Their magic still functions in the same way. Yeah. It's just that they have more abilities than everybody else.
Yeah.
So you want to make sure that even if your character is special or characters are special, that they still fit within the system that you've created, that they're not weird outliers to the system, because that's going to come across as unrealistic.
Seriously.
I mean, Harry goes through a lot of the same problems everyone else does. He has trouble with subjects. He has strengths in subjects. It's not like he's just automatically good at everything, because that would be really boring and not realistic. So giving your characters, like having them fit into the system, as well as giving them limitations, can be really useful. So I also say that all of this, I'm just going to be really long-winded, but I have a lot to say. You should also find a way to connect back the magic to the personalities of your characters. This is especially easy if it's categorized, but not necessarily. So this is my example that I came up with. In my series, this is how the magic system works. Every person that is a Mauritian has 4 particular powers. They all share these powers in common. Slightly different degrees, whatever, but they can all communicate telepathically, right?
Right.
Then most, not all, have a 5th power, and this is completely unique to them. Throughout all of history, no one has had the same power as them. They could have a similar one. So if you're a shapeshifter, for instance, maybe you shapeshift into inanimate objects, or maybe you shapeshift into people who exist so you can impersonate them. Maybe you can shapeshift features, but you can't look like anyone who actually exists. So there are a lot of different versions of that same sort of power. And so let's say that you have a shapeshifter who can only turn into people who exist, right? So they can impersonate people. Right. That's going to affect their personality. Do they have trouble?
Sorry, let me put my garbage outside.
Yeah.
Sorry. Okay, sorry.
Okay, no, you're good. So they can impersonate people. So that's going to make them maybe they're better liars, or maybe they have trouble pinning down their own identity, or maybe, they're more secretive, or maybe they're less secretive. Maybe they want to be very honest with people because they want to make up for the fact that they can do this.
Because they're self-conscious or ashamed or something. Or
do they see it as a curse? Do they see it as a gift? Whatever. That's going to link back to their personality. And so whatever strength your characters have magic wise should be affecting them in more than just magic. And I think this comes through too if you think about there may be or may not be non-magical people in the same series or universe or whatever, but they should be fundamentally different in some way that is not actually magic. Either magical people are more arrogant, or maybe the non-magical people are more arrogant because they see themselves as more quote unquote pure, or maybe they are self-conscious or whatever.
There should be cultural differences, notable cultural differences.
Right. And on a broad scale as well as individually. So whatever your limitations are for them, whatever their magical ability is, categorized or ambiguous, whatever, that should connect back to their personality. The same way that would work for anyone. I mean, if you're good in school, that's a different personality than people who are bad in school. It does affect you. And it can affect you in a lot of different ways. But it's going to affect how you view yourself and how you act. So
very true.
So link it back to their personality as well is another tip. And on the point of like limitations, I was thinking about Aragon because I really like this book, so I want to reread
I like this too.
I remember really vividly this scene. I don't remember which one, where his like teacher or whatever is teaching him how to kill people more efficiently. And he says, whatever like spell you put out is going to take that energy out of you. So like bashing someone in the head takes a lot of energy, but what doesn't take a lot of energy is cutting off a very particular like vein in their brain or whatever that kills them instantly by cutting off their oxygen. So he's like, you need to focus on like low outputs of energy for the same effect. And so kind of on that point, you want there to be physical limitations, and there needs to be some kind of system that makes sense. So like, does magic function based on energy? Does it function based on skill? So like in my world, it is somewhat connected to energy, but because everyone has their own individualized skill, it's not so much connected to, do you have the right ingredients? Do you have the right mindset? It's more like, do you have the skill or don't you?
Exactly.
If you take something like Mistborn, it functions on like, they consume certain metals and then they burn those metals.
Interesting.
Different metals give different skills, but you can only burn certain kinds depending on what your like proclivity is, right? So that's a limitation. They have to have a certain amount of metal for a certain amount of actions.
Interesting.
So so you want to give it, I guess, not rules, but you want to have some kind of system for how the magic functions. It's not real, so it's not necessarily physics, but you need to have some kind of clear-cut system for how they get the energy to do the magic, because that's going to give them limitations, and it's also going to help you build on like the function of magic in the world. That makes sense. So does it take energy? Does it take mindset? What does it take? Is it personal skill? Whatever. Yes. Okay. So my last point, it's not my last point, but my last main point is about connecting your magic system back to your theme. And so this is where I like tying it back to the fact that they're called Mauritians and that it's about individual unique skills. One of the themes, or like kind of broad topic that turns into a theme of my book, is individuality versus community. And like, where do the rights of the individual stop? Where do the rights of the community stop? How do you balance those two needs? And so that's like a theme of my book, which is indicated in the magic system. You have both communal powers. Everyone can use telepathy. You also have individual powers. People can shapeshift or do their own unique little things. So at what point do those clash? At what point does, someone end up not using their communal powers as much because they're not as unique? When do communal powers become the ones that are most necessary in a situation when our individual powers most necessary? So if you have a theme in mind, you should do your best to design the magic system to link back to that in some kind of way, represent it as strongly as possible. So like, what was my third thing? Oh, this is my other theme. So I said most people have a fifth power. Some of them don't. Some of them don't have a unique power. So all they have are the communal powers.
Mm-hmm.
And this is because I do think that there are some people in the world that have very specific skill sets and are very, I guess, pigeonholed. I don't know. I feel like I'm one of these people, right? Yeah. It's very good at very specific things for most of my life. Yeah. Then there are people out there that are just generally pretty good at a lot of things.
Yeah,
right?
It's a specialist versus generalist. Yeah, you're a specialist personality.
I am. And
I think I'm more of a generalist. I think I probably am more of a generalist.
And I guess one of the points I'm trying to make is that there is a lot of value in both of those kinds of people. I do think you need both.
Oh, yeah.
And so in the world, it's kind of, a disadvantage or seen to be a disadvantage if you don't have this fifth special unique power. But it's not always, because sometimes the people that don't have that ability are the ones that are most necessary for certain things to get done. Yeah. And so leaving room for that kind of a theme to play out in the system of magic is important. You don't want your magic system to be disconnected from your theme. Yeah. It should be related directly. Another good example of this is the Mirror Visitor series, where
no way.
I know, it's all about reflections and the way you perceive yourself. Mm-hmm. And the main character's literal power is that she can walk through mirrors. So any kind of metaphors that are used are related both to her physical magic as well as the theme. And so, I mean, I can't give you your theme or your magic system, but as much as you can, connect those two things.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then I just had some other last minute points. I feel like I'm going really long.
No, you're not. You're good.
So things to consider that aren't necessary as much. Think about mythology and religion and how that's going to relate to your magic system.
Hell yes.
Does the fact that magic exists make people believe more in God? They're more likely to believe in God, or are they less likely to believe in that? It could go either way, right? Something like Caraval, which has a really cool magic system as well. They have their own kind of deities. Mm-hmm. And not all of them become relevant at every given time, but there is a deity system there, like gods and goddesses type of thing going on, or Percy Jackson or something like that. Right. If it's based in a mythology, you already kind of have them there for you, like Percy Jackson, but you can also make up your own, which is one of the things I was really impressed by in Stephanie Garber's whole series, is that she essentially created her own, which is very cool. So think about how religion is going to play into it. Also different professions and jobs and businesses. What kinds of inventions would have been created in a magical universe?
Yeah.
What kinds of, jobs exist? Do they call different, do they not call them doctors? Do they call them healers or something, right? Do they have different names for things? I also think this is just a pet peeve of mine. If you have some kind of an urban fantasy or where the real world does exist, there's inevitably going to be this idea that the magical people can't let the non-magical people know about them.
Yep.
And I think we should try to come up with more creative ideas than just because if they knew, they would persecute us. Do I think this is true? Yes, I do think that. But only if non-magical people significantly outnumbered magical people.
Yeah.
It never makes sense to me that there could be even numbers and magical people wouldn't win. Of course they would.
They have magic for real.
Yeah. So they have to be in a severe minority for that to even make sense. But I do still think it's a little overdone. I think that's just kind of the fallback. I think there are a lot of possible answers. I'm not going to give you the answer for mine because I don't want anyone to steal it. But I came up with a list of other possible answers. So what? Maybe they forget. Maybe non-magical people don't have the ability to remember magic. This is used in Lock and Key on Netflix. It's also, I think, a comic series. What if people that don't have magical abilities just can't remember? So it's really not a factor of not wanting to tell them or being, too private to tell them. It's that you could tell them, but it won't do any good because they won't remember for long.
Yeah.
You could say that maybe non-magical people finding out about magical people is some kind of a key to a prophecy that no one wants to occur. And so they're keeping it hidden because they don't want that to come out. They don't want kind of that moment in history to have played out yet. There can be good goals. What if people who don't have magic would spend the rest of their lives essentially chasing after getting magic, and that's just not possible. And so kind of a noble goal to keep it from them is so that they don't have to live their lives miserable and seeking after something they can't have. Yeah. And also have bad motives. This is like where vampires come into it. What if they don't want them to know because they're a food source, and they don't want them to come up with potential defense systems?
Yes.
So there can be a strong variety of reasons that you wouldn't want non-magical people to know about it.
And there should be multiple.
There's nothing wrong with the persecution thing, but
I would say the Sentinels of New Orleans series does that as well really well. And part of that is it's kind of some of the stuff like you're saying, like some of them want to use humans as food sources. Some of them like to kind of like have kind of control. They can control certain elements of the human world, and they don't, they would obviously don't want that power to be challenged. So it's just easier to not have people know, but also because for humans to know, it breaks down the barrier between the paranormal world and the human world, which throws everything into chaos. So there just has to be a barrier in that setup. So the Sentinel of New Orleans is also probably, that's a good one to look to for like really unique rules of magic and magic systems, because I haven't seen it done like that before. Yeah. And it's got some of the characters that you recognize from magic and mythology, like werewolves and vampires, but then it's got other stuff too that either like maybe you think you've heard of it, but only vaguely. And then there's some stuff that I think she just made up. She's got something called the historical undead, which are the ghosts, but only the ghosts of people who are well remembered enough from history that the energy keeps them in existence.
Right. So they need people to keep remembering them.
Yes, exactly. So it's so interesting. Hers is Sentinels of New Orleans is very unique.
And that's another thing, like talking about, vampires and werewolves and things that already exist. If you're going to use something that already exists, put your own unique twist on it as much as you can. So like I made phoenixes shapeshifters. That's not, as far as I know, in the original mythology. It kind of connects back to it in the idea of phoenixes are symbols of transformation because they die and then come back to life.
It's on theme for the phoenix, but I don't think it's part of the phoenix folklore.
Right. So give your recycled magical creatures like different unique takes on their typical traits. I think just generally you want to have, you as the author need to know more details as opposed to fewer, I guess is really the main point. Think about all these things. There are things I haven't mentioned. I've tried to mention a lot of things for you to think about, but essentially anything that the real world has a take on, you can switch that up in accordance with what a magic system would be. The more you know about it, just going into it,
the more authentically you're going to write it.
Yeah. You're just going to include the details where they come up. You're going to have a certain instinctual rhythm that kind of works itself out. And as much as possible, you want to be able to know in advance instead of have to think of things as they come up.
Yes. It is much harder that way.
Yes. I think it's also true. It's easier to cut details than to add them in. So on like your first drafts, add in as many things as you can. And then if it, comes out that they're not relevant, you can cut them later. Knowing about them never hurt anyone. If nothing else, you just have some cool fun facts for your world.
Yeah, exactly.
You just don't want to get put in a situation where you're like, I need another magical species, but I don't know what other magical species exist.
Yeah, exactly. You need to be an expert on your world, but your characters don't need to be experts on the whole world.
Right. They're learning.
Yeah,
they're learning. The same as the readers are.
You as an author should be able to answer most of the big questions. I would say all the big questions and most of the littler ones too. And it's okay if your characters don't know the answers and your readers never get the answers.
Right.
But you need to know.
Yeah. And I do still think, I don't know if this is true of other genres, but I do think it is true of fantasy. I think you need to give yourself a lot of time to be thinking about it before you try to publish or submit it to things. I mean, if you want to give it to people for feedback, like ARC readers or whatever, not ARC readers, but readers, beta readers, everything, that's fine. But I really think it takes a couple years to get a magic system really well worked out.
I think it does too. And the thing, like you were saying before, like wait a year, I would say definitely wait. I mean, give it your first round of edits or whatever right away if you want to, but then you go back to it 6 months later, see how it is, see how you're feeling, go back to it a year later. Because also I've noticed, especially for me, like the 6-month mark, I'll look back and start to be like, I'm seeing some things I'm not loving in this. The year mark, I'll be like, a lot of times I'll be like, oh my God, what did I write? This is awful, which is not what you want. But the good news is if you're having that reaction, maybe that's a sign that either that's not the story you want to pursue publishing, or it is, but it just needs a lot more work. And because you gave yourself the time to wait, reflect, and look back on it later after you've grown as a writer for a whole 6 months or a year, then you can look back and know how to fix it also. And also you didn't waste a bunch of time querying it to agents that you can't re-query to for a while.
Right.
Yeah.
I just think it takes a lot of time to work out a magic system. And I don't know if this is why, but I think this is partially maybe why when people have really good, solid magic systems, they keep writing in those worlds, like Leigh Bardugo or Cassandra Clare. They keep writing stories in those worlds because they know them so well that it's sort of hard to get out of it and invest yourself in a new world, but also B, because there are so many details that you know about and so many paths that you can go down that readers are still going to like. I mean, if you like Shadow and Bone, you're going to like Six of Crows. If you liked Mortal Instruments, you're going to like Infernal Devices. If you liked the worlds, then exploring it further is almost always a pretty good idea. And so
and it's almost always an option. I mean, we live in one world and we have, like a million stories. Even if you only take stories that are contemporary, like that are written in contemporary settings, like settings that we're familiar with, there's still an endless stream because every day there's more happening. So there's an endless stream of opportunities. So I mean, hypothetically, if you build out your world enough in your fantasy book, you could continue to write new stories forever. Now, I don't have that kind of God brain. I'm probably not going to do that. But I think Leigh Bardugo did obviously excellently. She's like my queen as far as world building and magic systems go, is I think she just did really like for how far out she built it. And so but I think she only did 3 series in it. I mean, 3 series is a lot, but
you don't have to do that. I'm just saying that you as an author should kind of know your world well enough that like if a gun was to your head, you could.
Yes, I agree. You need to know enough about it that you could. Yeah. Well, it's the same. Like you need to, if you were suddenly to get called and have to go on in like an interview on a talk show and they're going to ask you a bunch of questions about your world, you need to have those answers. Obviously that's not like a highly likely situation, but that's not the point. Like you need to have those answers if you're not feeling like you have the answers in that situation, then it's time to do some more work.
Also I just want to make another point. So I said that if you have like a magical power, it should connect up to personality. It depends how your brain works. You could work the other way. You could start with your character and their personality and then give them an ability based on that. It just depends on if you're more plot minded or character minded. I tend to be more plot minded. So that's what I said. So I wanted to just clarify. It is okay. Like however you do it,
it just needs to be connected.
Things just need to be linked. You can start with whichever one you want, but just connect them. So everything I said, you can flip it. You don't have to start in the place I started, but they need to all be connected in that way. So
I agree. I totally agree.
I think that was it.
That's all you got? Nothing else you want to say about magic systems?
I could go into so much more detail about the things I already said, but those were my big points. Yes.
Awesome. Okay, cool. Well, if any of our listeners have any questions, you can definitely reach out and ask. I'm sure Lewis over there would be thrilled to answer your questions.
I would.
On that note, if you guys want to talk magic systems or anything else writing related, go check out Story Siren Studio. That's our production company. Story Siren Studio has a Patreon and the writing group is free to join. I repeat, it's free to join. You don't have to put in any kind of your info, just your name if you want to join the writing group. And it's fun. And we can talk about magic systems. We can talk about whatever you're working on and stuff we're working on, or whatever it is that you guys want to chat about. You can also follow us on TikTok and Instagram. TikTok is your place to go if you just like want a face full of Carissa. I know I do.
That's all it is.
It's all it is. It's all Carissa's face. And it's a bunch of funny writing videos. So if you're a writer, an author, whatever, even a reader, you're going to relate to these videos and they're very funny. So that's the Scriptureian Society on TikTok and same Scriptureian Society on Instagram. You can see like little clips from the episodes. You can see like little pieces of advice here and there. I'm sure all the ones this week are going to be I'm going to be like screenshotting all of them because they're going to be about magic systems.
I'm really excited to make them. I'll just go into way more detail on those probably.
I know you're gonna, and I'm so ready for it. I'm so excited.
Cool.
You guys can also check out exciting news. I forgot to say, you can go to storysirenstudio.com or you can even go to scriptureiansociety.com and it's going to take you to the same place. But we officially have Scripturian Society merch.
Yes.
Hooray. So right now they're all on white backgrounds because we're trying to figure out some of our design stuff. But there's some cool stuff. There's a water bottle, which I put because it's thematically relevant to you, Lewis, because you constantly
I love water.
She loves water. And in college, it was just the number of water bottles on her desk was just unbelievable. It was too funny.
Do you also love water bottles?
Do you also
head over
love
to
Story
Sirens
Studio.com and get your own Scripturian Society water bottle? But it actually it's a really nice water bottle. And there's mugs and there's a really cool hoodie that I really want. And there's t-shirts and so go check it out. You can also check out the Story Sirens merch. It's got a mermaid with headphones on. It's very cool. But those are all the ways you can support the pod / get involved, which is fun because we really want this to be a writing group for you guys. So like we want to talk about writing to people who are not just us.
Yeah. I don't just want to sit here and talk about I do, but it would be great if you guys like joined in.
Yeah, it would be back to me. I know she's like, I'm just talking to myself,
which I can do, but I've done that for so long. It would just be great if you guys like reached out, put some of your own words in.
Well, talking to other people about writing is really, how we become better writers too. I know also, I would say second to actually just writing constantly yourself for practice. I would say talking to other writers about writing in general. Like I just took so many notes on today's episode that's all just Carissa's ideas on something that I have a hard time with naturally. And we're both college educated. We both have degrees in English literature. Like that's not the point. It's just every writer has a different take. So whether it's with us or with your other writer friends, reach out to your writer friends, talk about what you're working on. Maybe you don't want to share details. Okay. Talk about concepts. Like do talk to other writers. It's just
for sure.
This is so fun for me. I feel like I've grown so much as a writer just like since doing this podcast with you.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
It's very fun. You can only be benefited. If you get nothing out of it, then it's still just fun.
Yeah, exactly. If nothing else, you're talking about something that you love to do. So where's the harm in that?
Yeah.
We have anything else we want to say to our listeners?
Nope. I talked a lot. So
you did, and I loved it.
Yep. I love you guys loved it too.
I'm sure
I could do a part 2 on this. Do you guys want a part 2?
I do. We should definitely schedule that. This is so exciting.
One day.
Do you have any writing updates? I almost forgot to ask.
No.
Neither do I.
We are not imposters. We promise. I just went on about magic systems. I know what I'm talking about.
She knows what she's talking about, you guys. Stop judging. I was sick. I really thought at first when I just started to get sick, I was like, oh, well, maybe I'll, get some writing done since I'll just be chilling in bed. No, I was in agony. I was like, I can't. My brain was like totally unable to focus on anything else. So I didn't. But
I always think that too. I'm like, I'm sick. I have time to do this thing. No, I have time to sleep.
You have time to sleep. Exactly. And that's what all I needed to do was like sleep. Even just resting in bed wasn't enough. I needed to be asleep. So, but there's no shame because I've been thinking about my story in my head. Like I have a bunch of new ideas for it and I'm like building out the world all the time thinking about it. So don't let anyone make you feel bad. As long as you're thinking about it, you're still doing the work that needs to be done.
For sure. The other day I came across a Bible verse and it's kind of an obscure one, but I was like, this goes really well with the theme of my book. I'm just going to jot that down. Like, does that count? I think it does.
That is so funny. My husband's Instagram is hilarious because he doesn't use it very often. But when I went to it, it's another completely random Bible verse. That's something about crushing your enemies. And I was like, it's completely, I don't even know what the context for it is.
Right.
It's not one of the verses that you study. I think it's like I think it's a verse that's taken out of like a historical, like recounting of some war or something.
Right.
And I'm like, this is what you
It's a very hobby thing to take out of the Bible for sure.
It really is. It really is. He's like, I love the Old Testament. And I'm like, okay, okay.
I love the Old Testament too. Judges is my favorite. So,
oh my God, you guys are wild.
Just putting that out there.
I like the New Testament.
I like Matthew. Everyone loves each other. It's nice.
Our listeners who are not religious are like, okay, you have lost us. We're never coming back.
Sorry.
Sorry guys, but
it's kind of like the difference between reading adult fantasy versus middle grade fantasy.
Yeah, I kind of
death, destruction, really all the evils, and then
that is very
lighter,
much what
fun
it's
stuff.
Like. Yeah. If you're not familiar with the Christian Bible, the New Testament is like much more
Percy
fun.
Jackson.
Yeah, like, Percy Jackson. Middle grade fun.
Yeah, lighter.
Yeah, lighter. And then the Old Testament is like really gritty, scary,
dark
adult
fantasy
fiction. And
everyone's dying. Game of Thrones level death.
Yeah. And debauchery. It's wild. It is much. Wild. Well, okay, so that's all we've got to say.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Well then, until next week, everybody, keep writing.
And we'll see you on the next page.